reasons U.S. forces went to Afghanistan was because Osama bin Laden was there and Al-Qaeda had training fields there. That appears not to be the case predominantly anymore, obviously. Is it time to pull U.S. troops out of Afghanistan?
Well, I would like to see them come home as soon as possible. Having said that, until there's security, stability in Afghanistan, that we have a Afghan government that can actually provide that security themselves, it's going to be very difficult for us to pull out.
So this doesn't change anything?
No, I don't think it does, because you still, while Osama bin Laden was the figurehead, there's a lot of Al-Qaeda.
So
does the American public...
Was this all symbolism?
No, it's very important that we got him finally. But does this change the whole dynamics? I don't think so. I think there's still very dedicated terrorists out there that want to do us great harm.
Does the American public have the stomach to keep U.S. troops in Afghanistan as long as we've been in South Korea and Germany?
I don't think so. No one wants that to happen. But the fact of the matter is, we are still in those places after many, many years. I would hope it's a very small presence, but we will have a presence there for many years to come.
Just to close that line,
Right.
President Obama, though, does want to begin withdrawing from Afghanistan this year. Do you support that?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I do, and taking into account what is actually the situation on the ground. But certainly I want our troops to come home as soon as possible. We've got almost 3,000 Iowa guardsmen over there, and it is a really difficult situation, but we've got to understand that if we pull out and the Taliban comes back, that we haven't accomplished anything.
Earlier, and you were talking about Leonard Richmond, you said that he had voted for what you called Obamacare, the Health Care Reform Act. But you now are voting on separate provisions to fund part of that reform, and you're voting against it. Is the strategy to economically starve the Reform Act?
I think if you talk to my constituents, people understand that this bill will not work long term. And if you go back, Dean, to when this was put in place on Christmas Eve over in the Senate, that they had the Cornhusker kickback that the Louisiana purchased to try and buy votes. Everyone on both sides of the aisle in the House of Representatives understood that this thing would never work. And because of the election that happened in Massachusetts with Scott Brown, the House then was forced, under Speaker Pelosi, to pass it as it was. So people understand that this is a huge new mandate, a massive new tax.
So the way to undermine it is
certainly it's to
defund.
I think it's going to take an election, but we need to have real health care reform that will help people with pre-existing conditions be affordable, and that's what people are looking for. They're not looking for this massive government takeover of something that's very personal with the doctor and the patient, their health care.
I'd like you to turn to another topic, and that's oil subsidies.
Sure.
With gasoline nearing $4 a gallon, with the Gulf oil spill, how do you justify subsidizing the oil industry?
Well, I'm not sure. I do think at this point in time, with the economy and the state it is, it's the wrong time to raise taxes on anyone. Mm-hmm. I think what we need to actually have is an energy policy in this country where we actually look at conservation to make sure that we're not wasting energy, our homes, our automobiles, all those things. We've got to look at all the renewables, whether you talk about ethanol, biodiesel, wind, solar, nuclear's got to be a part of that. And we've got to have the ability to go after the resources we have in great abundance right here in the U.S. Mm-hmm. The oil and gas reserves that we have, far greater than Saudi Arabia, if in fact we had an administration that would allow us to go after them.
Does that include drilling in the Alaska reserve?
I think we need to be independent here as much as possible, do it as soon as possible, and just the idea that we were actually going to finally have a policy in place would reduce the cost.
So that means yes.
And I was just assigned this week to the Energy Task Force in the House of Representatives. So we're going to be developing policies that are going to make us energy independent. certainly not have as much influence from the Middle East
Right.
and things like
But
that.
specifically ANWR, that means yes, drilling in ANWR.
Yes, I think we've got to go everywhere.
One of your Republican colleagues, Wisconsin Republican Paul Ryan, has proposed a budget that would see Social Security changed as well as Medicare.
No,
He
there's
would
no
raise the
change in Social
retirement.
Security.
He'd raise the retirement age, wouldn't he, to 69?
No, well, go ahead with it. But no, there's no change as far for people who are 55 years and older, people currently in the system. There are no changes in Social Security and Medicare, any of those.
But it'd change it for me.
We've got to look long-term and to make things sustainable. And we have got to understand that Medicare is really the one that has the biggest problem as far as going broke here in the next 10 years.
He has proposed giving people a voucher, 55 and under, and letting them go on the private market and buy. Do you support that?
There's no voucher anywhere in that bill. And that's a misconception. That's political speak out there. He had a plan, another in his book that talked about vouchers, but the bill that was passed has no vouchers in it. What it does is put people 55 and under, when they become eligible for Medicare, to have the same kind of health insurance that members of Congress do. So it would be a subsidized plan that they would purchase. Seniors understand, today that they purchase insurance for their Medicare gap, for their prescription drugs. In essence, the same type of program, but there's no voucher anywhere.
Well, your people are pretty defensive about suggestions that you're tinkering with Medicare, suggestions you're tampering with Social Security. Mm-hmm. In reality, can you deal with the federal deficit without tampering with those programs?
Right. We have to make sure that the security is there for our seniors, and that's why no one currently in the system, no one coming in the next 10 years would be affected. But we have to look long term. It's simply not sustainable. And, the president's budget that he put out in February adds about $10 trillion in the next 10 years to our national debt. At that point, all of the tax revenue goes simply to pay interest on the debt.
So the message you have to people...
We've got to do something. It is irresponsible to not do anything.
Let's make it real personal. The message you have to people is, for Mike Glover, everything's fine. For Kate Henderson, you're in deep trouble.
No, not at all. But it will not be there for you or for Kay Henderson if, in fact, we don't do something today. And we have an opportunity. The only way that we're ever going to get anything done will be on a bipartisan basis. And that's why we have an opportunity with a Republican-controlled House, Democrat-controlled Senate, and a Democrat president to actually do some things that will fix this problem long term.
What about the debt ceiling? Congress will soon be asked to raise the debt ceiling. Are you among those who will vote no?
Yes, I will not support that, because all it is saying that we've maxed out our credit card. If you're a family, you've maxed out your credit card. So rather than change your habits, all you do is call the credit card company and say, I want to borrow more.
So what's the alternative? That shuts down government.
No, it doesn't. What the alternative is to actually fix the problem. And that's what we have been saying for years, is that we need to finally address the irresponsible spending that's going on in Washington. Long term, we've got to fix the problem and do it now.
Okay.
If we wait 5 years, Dean, it's too late.
Let's include in there agricultural farm subsidies. Tom Vilsack, Agriculture Secretary, was on the program within the past 3-4 weeks. He said, get ready for some changes, because he believes and even supports that changes have to be made in the current farm program. Mm-hmm. You have a farm background. You support that?
Well, farmers are the first ones to tell you today that the direct payments are not sustainable. Even the Iowa Farm Bureau supports getting rid of those. The biggest threat to farmers today is higher taxes, is the regulatory schemes that are coming out of places like EPA, and they're going to basically put them out of business or have been so expensive to operate that they can't. The high interest rates, if the government keeps borrowing and spending like it is, the high interest rates that are going to come, those are the issues that they're really concerned about. What we need to have is a risk management tool in the farm bill so that farmers can actually know that they can insure their crops, that they can continue long term, but they understand that it's simply not sustainable as it is.
Congressman, it wouldn't be an official Iowa Press program if we didn't talk just a little bit of politics. You're looking at a sitting Democratic president who's
I thought we did that already.
We're looking at a sitting Democratic president whose approval ratings are over 50%, who's planning on raising $1 billion for the next campaign, and you don't have a clear alternative to him.
Right.
How do you get this guy?
Well, I think it's going to boil down to a referendum, obviously, on the president, as re-elections normally are.
And with his poll numbers above 50%,
Right.
how do you make that referendum
Well,
work?
certainly there's a bump right now with national security issues, but the election is going to come down to economic security. It's going to come down to jobs. It's going to come down to spending in Washington. And if there is a good Republican candidate that can be a very viable alternative, the president is going to be the issue, as it always is.
Do you have a favorite?
No, I don't.
You're going to stay neutral throughout?
Absolutely, I always have, and yeah.
You've got a little bit of time here before, and we've got just a few seconds left here, but will you be, in effect, representing, well, you said you represent all of Iowa, but spending a lot of time in the 3rd District and in your 4th?
Well, we're going to get acquainted more so with people throughout the new 3rd District, but I certainly have all of my responsibilities I currently do with the current district, and I'm going to continue to honor that commitment that I have, and it is it's a great district, and I look forward to the 3rd District as representing them well also.
Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Dean.
Back next weekend, usual Iowa Press time, 7:30 Friday night, 11:30 Sunday morning. I hope you'll watch. I'm Dean Board, and thanks for joining us today.
Archive editions of Iowa Press can be accessed on the World Wide Web.